Oh, let's just kill Stephanie and go to jail for the rest of my life. That seems like a good idea to do this morning.
What drives someone to look a grieving family in the eye every single day while hiding the truth about the person they're all desperately searching for? Stephanie vanished in 2007, leaving behind a 4-month-old baby and a family shattered by unanswered questions. No body, no witnesses, no leads. For years, the case went cold, but killers who think they're untouchable always make one fatal mistake. And in this case, that mistake was hiding in plain sight. A car driven every day, a trunk trusted to keep a secret, quietly collecting evidence that would finally speak her name. To understand how it came to this, we have to go back to that Monday morning. Before we begin, drop a quick comment for me. What's the weather like where you are right now? Your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to read. Just a quick note. Certain details have been adjusted for storytelling. The heart of the story, the message, is what I hope stays with you. Stephanie told Kenny she'd be right back, and then she was gone. The Monday had started like any other in the Idaho Falls duplex. Michael left for work at 6:45 that morning, the last normal moment before everything changed. He kissed Stephanie goodbye, checked on their 4-month-old daughter sleeping in the back bedroom, and walked out into the August heat. His half-brother Kenny was still asleep somewhere in the small house they all shared. Stephanie had just come home from jail not long before that Monday, trying to rebuild her life with Michael and their baby. The duplex wasn't much. 2 narrow units carved from a single structure, thin walls, shared pipes, but it was a start. She spent the early morning hours alone with the baby while sunlight crept through the windows. Ordinary and quiet. Kenny Jones, 19, worked sporadic shifts at Cardon's car wash and lived in the duplex with his half-brother's family. He woke around 8, the house still and calm. At some point that morning, he needed to make a call. He didn't have a phone of his own, so he borrowed Stephanie's. What happened next came from Kenny's own account, given later when investigators asked him to walk through that Monday minute by minute. Stephanie said she'd be right back. She left the duplex, leaving her 4-month-old daughter inside. No argument loud enough for neighbors to hear. No screams cutting through the August air. No struggle that left broken furniture or overturned chairs. Just an ordinary departure. A woman stepping out of her home, saying the kind of thing people say 100 times without thinking. How many last words are ordinary, spoken without knowing they're final? The baby stayed in the duplex. Stephanie did not come back. Lynette, mother to both Michael and Kenny, returned to the house at 12:30 that afternoon. She heard the crying before she opened the door. Sharp, insistent. The sound of an infant left alone too long. She moved through the duplex, calling Stephanie's name. Bedroom, empty. Kitchen, dishes in the sink, no one there. Bathroom, door open, lights off. The baby wailed from the back room, and Stephanie was nowhere. Lynette grabbed the phone, the landline, cold and familiar against her ear, and dialed Michael at work. Her voice cracked with something between confusion and panic. Stephanie was gone. The baby had been alone. Where was she? Michael tried to make sense of it from the other end of the line. She'd said she'd be right back. Where could she have gone? How long had the baby been crying? Lynette kept asking the same question, the only one that mattered. Where is she? Police would catalog everything in that duplex over the coming days. Baby clothes, bottles, furniture, keys, all accounted for. They'd inventory the rooms, photograph the spaces, document what was there and what wasn't. The only object that vanished with Stephanie was her cell phone, and Kenny was the last person anyone knew had touched it. Hours after borrowing that phone, Kenny showed up at Cardon's car wash with marks no one expected to see. The scratches on his neck ran vertical, like fingernails, not horizontal, like a tree branch. Gary, a manager at the car wash, noticed them first. Red lines, distinct, running down the side of Kenny's throat. Before Gary could ask, Kenny volunteered an explanation. He'd hit a tree branch in the parking lot, he said. Just an accident. Nothing to worry about. Jesus, Kenny's co-worker, saw the marks too. Everyone was asking about them. Kenny kept repeating the same story: the tree branch, the parking lot, bad luck. He explained himself before anyone pressed for details, offering an answer to a question not yet fully posed. Keep that pattern in mind. Innocent people wait for the question. Guilty people answer before it's asked. The same Monday morning, at 11:43 a.m., Michael was driving when he passed Ammon Road between 17th and Sunnyside. He glanced over and spotted Kenny behind the wheel of his own car, heading south. Kenny appeared to be talking, animated, alone in the vehicle, his mouth moving like he was arguing with someone who wasn't there. The direction he was driving didn't make sense. Not toward home, not toward work, just south, into emptiness. Michael noted it, filed it away, and kept driving. Strange, but not alarming. Not yet. How many guilty men explain themselves before the accusation is spoken? At 12:30 that afternoon, Michael's phone rang. He recognized his mother's number before he answered, but he didn't recognize the sound of her voice when she spoke. Lynette's words came fast, edged with something between confusion and panic. Stephanie's gone. The baby was here alone. Michael tried to piece it together from the other end of the line. Gone where? She'd said she'd be right back. Where could she have gone? How long had the baby been crying? Lynette kept repeating the same question, the only one that mattered now. Where is she? Michael didn't have an answer. Stephanie had left that morning saying she'd return. She hadn't taken the baby. She hadn't packed a bag. She'd just stepped out, ordinary and unremarkable, and then failed to come back. Lynette stayed on the line, her voice rising. The duplex felt wrong, she said. Empty, in a way it shouldn't be. Stephanie's things were still there. Clothes in the bedroom, dishes in the sink, but Stephanie herself was gone. Michael's mind cycled through possibilities, none of them making sense. Maybe she'd gone to the store. Maybe she'd run into a friend. Maybe her phone had died and she couldn't call. But the baby had been alone, crying, and no mother who said she'd be right back would leave her child that long without a word. The timeline was unforgiving. Kenny had been the last person to see Stephanie with her phone that morning.
Stephanie said she'd be right back.
He'd been spotted driving south on Ammon Road, alone, talking to himself, less than an hour before Lynette discovered the baby crying and Stephanie missing. And when investigators would finally sit down with him 3 days later, he'd have an alibi ready for every minute of that Monday. Detailed, confident, delivered without hesitation. When investigators sat down with Kenny 3 days later, he'd have an alibi ready for every minute of that Monday. The detective settling into the chair across from him had seen his share of missing persons cases.
I don't have any other phone. Hers was the only phone at home.
Mid-40s, 20 years on the force. The kind of weathered patience that came from wading through hundreds of these interviews. He clicked his pen once and opened his notebook. "Walk me through Monday night," he said, "after you left work." Kenny didn't hesitate. "I went over to Colby's house and we played video games." His hands rested flat on the table. No fidgeting, no nervous energy. Got there around 7:30, stayed until midnight. "What were you playing? Sports Champions? It has boxing, tennis, golf, track, all kinds of stuff." The specificity was striking. Not just PlayStation or some games. The exact title. The exact events. Kenny's recall was either remarkably sharp or remarkably rehearsed. The detective made a note. Guilty people often over-prepared their stories, loading them with unnecessary details to prove legitimacy. Innocent people rarely remembered what game they'd played 3 nights ago. "And you were with Colby the whole time?" "Yeah, the whole time, from 7:30 to midnight." The detective leaned back. "Kenny, would you be willing to take a polygraph?" Most people paused at that question. Most people showed some flicker of anxiety, even the innocent ones. Kenny didn't pause. "Yeah, I'll take one." But then came the qualifier. I was pretty much at Colby's house the whole night. Pretty much. Not I was at Colby's house. Pretty much. The certainty from 30 seconds earlier had suddenly developed hedges. The detective's pen stilled. Pretty much? Yeah, for a positive fact, that's what happened. Why does a truthful person need to say, for a positive fact? The phrase itself protests too much, wraps simple truth in unnecessary emphasis. People who tell the truth don't typically need to certify it. The detective let the silence stretch. Kenny filled it. I mean, I was there, 7:30 to midnight, playing sports champions with Colby. Back to precision again. Back to the exact game title, the exact times. But the qualifiers had slipped through, pretty much, for a positive fact, little cracks in an otherwise smooth surface. The detective made another note. In interrogation rooms, language mattered as much as facts. The words people chose, the phrases they used to distance themselves from their own statements, pretty much, created wiggle room. For a positive fact, tried to close it again. He looked up from his notebook. Who can confirm you were at Colby's house? Colby, Kenny said immediately. He was there with me the whole time. There it was. The alibi witness, the person who could either verify Kenny's account or dismantle it entirely. Kenny looked steady, confident, too confident perhaps. The detective closed his notebook. All right, we'll be in touch about that polygraph. As Kenny left the interview room, the detective reached for his phone. The alibi looked airtight. A friend's house, video games, 5 hours accounted for. He just needed to call Colby. Colby's answer came back clear and final. He hadn't seen Kenny in months. The detective sat across from Kenny again, file open. I called Colby, he said. Kenny's face didn't change. He says you weren't at his house Monday night. Says he hasn't seen you in months. His wife Tori backed that up. No protest, no confusion, no scramble to explain. Kenny just sat there, hands flat on the table. The detective slid another page across. The car wash confirms you didn't clock in that morning. No punch-in logged. No record of Kenny arriving at 7:30 like he'd claimed.
The only thing you guys are ever going to believe me saying is that I chopped her up into little pieces and put her in a box somewhere.
The alibi built with such careful specificity. Sports champions, 7:30 to midnight, Colby the whole time, had taken minutes to dismantle. Every piece was a lie. Where were you Monday night? Kenny looked at him, said nothing. The polygraph results came next. The examiner indicates deception on every question about Stephanie. Whether you saw her Monday, whether you know where she is, whether you harmed her. This was the moment an innocent person would erupt, shock turning to outrage, confusion to anger. An innocent man accused of hurting someone he cared about doesn't sit quietly. He fights back, demands to know how the machine could be wrong, insists on retesting. Kenny did none of that. He sat silent, like he'd already known what the results would say. No surprise registered on his face. No protest formed on his lips. You're not even surprised, are you? Kenny looked down at his hands. The guilty don't protest innocence. They sit quiet and wait for the next question. But sitting silent wasn't a crime. Lying about an alibi wasn't enough to charge him. The detective needed more. The forensic team found it 3 days later. They sprayed luminol in the duplex bathroom, the chemical mist settling over every surface. Then they killed the lights. The room lit up blue-white. Blood on the vanity backsplash. Blood on the sink handles. Blood on the cabinet doors, the toilet handle, the bathtub drain, the doorknob. Someone had cleaned this bathroom carefully, wiping down every surface, running water until it looked clear. Luminol doesn't lie. The chemical finds what soap and bleach leave behind. The pattern told its own story, not a few drops from a shaving cut, but the kind of spread that comes from cleanup, from scrubbing, from trying to erase what happened. Yet, without Stephanie's body, the case stalled. Blood evidence without proof of death. A suspect who couldn't explain the scratches on his neck, the lies, the failed polygraph, the luminol glow painting his bathroom, and accusations. But no body, no murder weapon, no witnesses. The blood in the bathroom said violence. The scratches on Kenny's neck said struggle. His collapsed alibi and failed polygraph said liar. But Stephanie's absence said the one thing prosecutors needed most was still missing. A suspect who couldn't explain himself, and nothing to charge him with. The case went cold. Kenny couldn't be charged without a body, so he walked free. The family waited. Hope dimmed. Years passed. The call came years later, from a hillside no one had thought to search. April 23, 2010. A stranger dialed 911 from the Ammon Foothills, voice shaking. Someone with no connection to the case, who'd simply stumbled onto the burial site years after Stephanie vanished. The body surfaced exactly where Kenny had been spotted driving that Monday morning, southbound, alone, talking to himself on a dirt road cutting through wheatgrass. "I need to report. I found a body up here on the hill." The dispatcher's voice steadied. "Can you describe what you see? A kid or a woman, small, with red hair?" The caller's breath came fast. About 20 yards from the dirt road, lying on the hillside, the kind of place a body gets hidden when the person hiding it doesn't want it found. Years had passed since Stephanie vanished. The case file had grown cold. The family's questions unanswered. Now someone was calling from the foothills. The exact terrain Kenny had driven through the morning she disappeared. Forensic teams arrived within the hour. The body was wrapped in a blue blanket, layered with a floral pattern fitted sheet. Black electrical tape circled the head. More tape bound the hands together. Whoever left her here had tried to conceal what they'd done. Not just the location, but the body itself, wrapped tight against discovery. This wasn't panic. This was deliberate, the kind of careful concealment that takes time, planning, control. The blanket was folded precisely, the tape applied methodically. Someone had stood on this hillside and worked to hide her, layer by layer. Some truths wait years to surface, buried under dirt and silence, until chance or conscience brings them back. Before we reveal who was under that blanket, comment A if you think it's Stephanie, or B if it's someone else. Add one short reason why. This is where the case turns. Please note, what follows includes some recreated details for narrative purposes, conveying the emotional weight the family faced. Advanced decomposition meant the autopsy couldn't pinpoint an exact cause of death. The medical examiner's report read, "Undetermined violence," but dental records don't lie. This was Stephanie. The family could finally bring her home after years of not knowing. Yet the question of how she died, what happened in those final moments, remained trapped in a body that had been buried too long to speak clearly. The site sat less than a mile from Ammon Road, the same southbound route Michael had watched Kenny driving the morning Stephanie vanished. She'd been there the whole time, wrapped and hidden on a hillside within sight of the route Kenny traveled that Monday. But knowing where she was didn't answer what the family needed most: proof of who put her there. The proof had been sitting in Kenny's car the entire time. The trunk opened under fluorescent lights in the police evidence bay, and forensic investigators saw what they'd missed years earlier. Kenny's car, the one he'd driven every day for years after Stephanie vanished, now sat under examination with a different purpose. The first search had been for a missing person. This one was for a murder. The team worked methodically, cameras clicking with each discovery. They'd searched this trunk before, back when Stephanie was just missing and hope still lived. That first search had been cursory, looking for signs of struggle, obvious blood, something that screamed foul play. Now, with her body identified and the burial site mapped, they knew what to look for. New technology, new eyes, new questions. The trunk lining came first. Standard black carpeting, worn from years of use, nothing remarkable to the casual observer. But forensic work isn't casual observation. They lifted the carpet carefully, examining every fiber under magnification. Reddish-brown strands clung to the fabric, hair, several of them, caught in the weave. The DNA sequencing came back days later, matched to Stephanie's molar tooth, her genetic signature preserved in a few strands. Kenny never noticed, never thought to clean, never knew were there. Then came the tape. Black electrical tape, still stuck to the trunk's interior, adhesive holding fast years later. The forensic team photographed it from every angle before collection. Each piece bagged separately, labeled, logged, brand and thickness analyzed, compared against the tape that had bound Stephanie's hands and wrapped around her head on that hillside. Identical. Evidence doesn't decompose the way bodies do. It just waits. The examination moved to the exterior. Dirt caked on the wheel wells, packed into crevices the car wash spray never reached. The color and composition matched the road leading to the burial site. The same dirt road cutting through the almond foothills where Kenny had been spotted driving that Monday morning. Wheatgrass, dried and brittle, stuck to the undercarriage. The same wild grass growing around her grave, trapped there for years. Every time Kenny drove, that grass rode underneath, invisible evidence pressed against metal. Then they sprayed luminol. The trunk interior lit up blue-white. Blood on the jumper cables. Blood on the tow chain buried under the spare tire. Small amounts, but unmistakable. Someone had tried to wipe it down. But luminol finds what the eye can't see. Kenny had chosen his own car to transport and hide her. The vehicle he drove to work every day, parked in public lots, took through car washes that cleaned the surface but never touched what mattered. He'd never deep cleaned the trunk, never replaced the lining, never thought anyone would look twice. The car he'd trusted to keep his secret became the only witness that could speak her name. The confession had already happened years earlier, in a place where secrets are currency and trust is a weapon. In jail, where secrets are currency, Kenny met someone who seemed like a friend. Kenny landed in county jail on an unrelated charge, not for Stephanie's disappearance, just another offense that put him behind bars temporarily. The case against him for murder had stalled years ago. No body then, no charges filed, just suspicion that followed him like a shadow. Eddie Arano wasn't just another inmate. He was a known jailhouse informant who recognized Kenny's case the moment he heard the name. Stephanie's disappearance had been news. The suspect who walked free, the missing woman never found, the cold investigation. Eddie knew the story, and he saw an opportunity to trade information for leverage on his own sentence. Building trust takes patience. Eddie had that. Shared stories in the day room, casual conversation between cell bars, the illusion of safety that comes from concrete walls where no cameras record what two men say to each other in the quiet hours. Kenny started to talk. What Kenny told Eddie, he'd never told the detectives in that interrogation room. He allegedly confessed the whole thing, killed Stephanie, buried her where no one would look. Then came the detail that made everything make terrible sense. Kenny called Stephanie his girlfriend, not his brother's partner, not the mother of his brother's child, his girlfriend. Claiming possession of a woman who'd never been his, who'd lived in the same house because she was with Michael, not him. He said he had her all to himself now. The delusion revealed in those words explained the violence. A man who couldn't accept that she belonged with someone else, who saw her death as a way to own what he'd never had in life. In jail, trust is a weapon, and Kenny handed it to exactly the wrong person. Years passed. The case went cold again. Then, in 2014, Detective Jessica Marley inherited the file, determined to finish what others had started. By 2018, she was interviewing Eddie again. He added more details this time, his memory sharpened by repeated telling. He told me he buried her in a shallow grave in the mountains, away from the roads, away from where anyone would search. Kenny had described it all: the killing, the burial, the possession. Everything he'd once denied to a detective's face, he'd already said out loud, just to the wrong person to trust. The confession existed now, documented in Eddie's statements, recorded in official interviews, but jailhouse informant testimony carries weight problems in court, easily challenged, often dismissed as unreliable. A convicted criminal trading lies for reduced time. What prosecutors really needed was Kenny's own voice on tape, caught in the moment, edging as close to the truth as his practiced lies would allow. That recording existed too. On the interrogation footage, Kenny chose the chair farthest from Stephanie's photograph. The interrogation room from 2007 held one image, her face, placed on the table where Kenny couldn't avoid seeing it. He sat as far away as the small room allowed, body angled, eyes anywhere but there. The detective watched this. Guilty men can't look at what they've done, even in a picture. The footage captured every avoidance. Kenny shifted in his seat, fingers drumming on the cold metal table. The photograph sat centered, Stephanie's face looking directly at the camera. Kenny's gaze traced the walls, the ceiling, the detective's hands, everywhere except her eyes. Some things the body reveals before the mouth ever opens. The detective slid the evidence folder across the table. Colby says he never saw you Monday night. Says you weren't at his house. The pages turned, one fact after another. The car wash has no record of you clocking in that morning. Kenny's jaw tightened. The polygraph says you're lying about Stephanie, about what happened to her. Kenny's voice rose, not with protest, but with something darker. The only thing you guys are ever going to believe me saying is that I chopped her up in little pieces and put her in a box somewhere. The sentence hung in the recorded air. It wasn't a confession. It was sarcasm wrapped around truth, the closest Kenny ever came to saying what he did. Not, I didn't do anything. Not, you're wrong. Instead, he gave them the image, chopping pieces, a box, dressed up as mockery. Real confessions sound like relief. Kenny's sounded like a dare. The line wasn't an admission prosecutors could use directly, but it was the only time Kenny spoke about dismemberment. The only moment his lies slipped close to truth. Years later, when they found Stephanie on that hillside, when the trunk revealed her DNA, this moment would echo differently. He'd told them. He just hadn't called it a confession. After those words, Kenny didn't take them back. Didn't say, but I didn't. The detective waited, watching for the correction that never came. Then Kenny cried, his face contorted, shoulders shaking, the performance of a man overwhelmed by grief. The detective leaned in. No moisture, no actual tears on his cheeks, just the motions, the theatrical display of remorse for a crime he still wouldn't name. Stephanie's name got spoken more times in that room than Kenny's own. The detective repeated it like an anchor, forcing Kenny to hear what he refused to see in the photograph. Yet Kenny never once said what happened to her, never gave the story behind the sarcasm, never admitted the truth. The interrogation ended with silence. Kenny sitting as far from her picture as he could get, fake tears drying on a face that revealed everything and admitted nothing. Combined with all the other evidence, it was finally enough. 14 years after Stephanie vanished, Kenny stood in a courtroom behind glass, wearing a red mask, about to speak words that still wouldn't tell the whole truth. The courtroom looked nothing like the interrogation rooms where Kenny had once sat spinning lies. He appeared behind a glass barrier, the red mask covering his face, a pandemic-era shield that made his voice muffled, distant. No jury would hear this. No trial would excavate every detail. The plea deal had already been made. The glass created distance between Kenny and the consequences of his words, between what he would say and what actually happened, between the truth and the carefully edited version he'd agreed to speak. He stood alone behind the barrier, facing the judge who would pronounce sentence on a crime 14 years in the making. The room was quiet, no audience packed into benches, no cameras catching every word, just the essential players in a case that had waited too long for this moment. Kenny pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter and evidence concealment. His statement came through the mask and glass, each word carefully chosen. I pushed her, causing her to fall back and hit her head, which she never recovered from. Still wouldn't say died. Even now, at the moment of admitting what he'd done, the hedging continued, the evasion embedded in the syntax. He kept going. I didn't know what else to do, and I panicked, and I tried to conceal her body in the foothills. What was the fight about? He never said. What really happened in those final moments before Stephanie stopped breathing? Kenny kept that. The details remained his, locked behind the mask, the glass, the carefully negotiated language of the plea agreement. This is what justice looks like when it arrives too late and too incomplete. A mask, glass, and words that still won't land on truth. The judge delivered the sentence, 15 years, with a minimum of 6 before Kenny would become eligible for release. Justice had arrived. But not in the form families dream of when they lose someone to violence. No trial where every lie gets exposed in public. No jury deliberation. No moment where Kenny finally says Stephanie's name and admits what he did without hedging, without minimizing, without the protective distance of legalese. Just a plea deal, evasive language, and a sentence that meant Kenny could walk free in 6 years, still relatively young, still carrying the only complete version of what happened that morning. The plea deal meant no trial, no public excavation of every detail. He got to control the narrative one last time, avoiding the courtroom confrontation where prosecutors would have laid out every piece, the hair in his trunk, the electrical tape, the luminol glow, Eddie's testimony, the sarcastic confession on camera. 14 years between her disappearance and his guilty plea. 6 years minimum before parole. The math told its own story about justice delayed and never fully delivered. Years after the conviction, one truth remained crystal clear.
Anywhere. There's no blood on any of my clothes. There's no blood in my car. There's no blood nowhere. I didn't touch her. She was...
Stephanie's daughter grew up old enough to remember having a mother, but never old enough to understand what happened to her. The 4-month-old baby left in that duplex is grown now, living a life shaped by absence. She knows her mother through photographs and stories others tell, never through memory of her own. Old enough to have needed a mother through childhood, through adolescence, through milestones. Never old enough, that Monday morning, to remember the woman who said she'd be right back. The photographs capture moments frozen in time. Stephanie smiling. Stephanie holding her infant daughter, Stephanie alive. But photographs don't answer the questions a child asks as she grows. What her mother's voice sounded like, what her hands felt like, what advice she would have given. Those answers live only in other people's memories now. Borrowed stories of a woman her daughter should have known, but can only piece together. What happened between them that morning? The fight Kenny reduced to just an altercation. No one outside that room will ever really know. He gave prosecutors a version stripped of context, sanitized into a push and a fall. The anger that drove it, the words that preceded it, the moments between. Kenny keeps those. Stephanie's cell phone, the only object that vanished alongside her, was never recovered. Whatever messages it held, whatever last calls it recorded, disappeared with her. Some evidence waits patiently. A strand of hair, a piece of tape, dirt that refuses to wash away. But some truths stay buried deeper than bodies, carried only by the person who won't speak them. The final irony sits clear. Kenny chose his own car to hide her in, used his trunk to transport her body to that hillside, drove those same roads for years, never deep cleaned the evidence, never replaced the trunk lining, never thought anyone would look twice. He thought it was the safest place, the one space he controlled completely. the last place anyone would search after that first inspection. Years later, that same car became the thing that said his name. The trunk remembered what he tried to forget: hair strands caught in the fabric, electrical tape, blood revealed by luminol, dirt from the burial site, wheatgrass from her grave. Every piece he thought he'd hidden became the evidence that named him. 15 years with a minimum of 6 before parole. Kenny could walk free, still young enough to build a new life. Stephanie's daughter will never get that chance to know her mother, to hear her voice, to have what was stolen from both of them. The car he chose to hide her in became the thing that spoke her name. The trunk he trusted became the witness that wouldn't stay silent. And in remembering what Kenny tried to forget, it finally spoke for the woman who said she'd be right back and never came home. That's where Stephanie's story ends. Not with the answers her family deserved, but with the irony that justice finally arrived through the very thing her killer thought would keep him safe. Stephanie was more than a case file, more than evidence in a trunk. She was a mother who should have watched her daughter grow up. She should have been there for first words, first steps, graduations, all the moments her daughter had to face without her. Her life mattered. Her absence left a hole that 14 years and a guilty plea could never fill. This case reminds us that truth has a way of surfacing, even when someone tries to bury it. Evidence doesn't forget. It waits patiently. A strand of hair, a piece of tape, dirt that refuses to wash away. And sometimes, the thing a killer trusts most becomes the witness that refuses to stay silent. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your comments mean more than you know. Drop a word or two about what stayed with you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message about truth and consequences, feel free to share it with them. Thank you for listening with respect and care. This story is based on a real case, with some scenes dramatized to convey the emotional weight and gravity of what happened. My deepest respect goes to Stephanie's family and loved ones, who lived through years of unanswered questions before justice finally arrived.